Welcome to Pully Ministries Audio Bible, Special Edition, the Apocrypha, the Wisdom of Solomon, Part 2. If you didn't see the first video, the Apocrypha, or the Middle Testament as I call it, is a group of religious texts containing historical information from the time of the Jews returning from exile to the story of Christ. And so if you ever wonder what happened in between the Testaments, the Apocrypha is it. The Wisdom of Solomon is wisdom literature, similar to Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. And it's from the intertestamental period. It carries Solomon's name, but he was not the author of it. This is the second part of the book, chapters 11 through 20. It's mostly about wisdom. And we'll start with chapter 11, which is where we left off. It starts with she. The she it's speaking of is wisdom, and at this point, I believe it's sort of recounting the wandering time of the Jews in the desert. So, here we go. The Wisdom of Solomon, Part 2, Chapter 11. She prospered their works in the hand of the holy prophet. They went through the wilderness that was not inhabited, and pitched tents in places where there lay no way. When they were thirsty, they called out upon thee, and water was given them out of the flinty rock, and their thirst was quenched out of the hard stone. For by what things their enemies were punished, by the same thing they in their need were benefited. For instead of a fountain of a perpetual running river troubled with foul blood, for a manifest reproof of that commandment, whereby the infants were slain, thou gavest unto them abundance of water by a means which they had hoped not for. Declaring by that thirst, then, how thou hadst punished their adversaries. For when they were tried, albeit but in mercy chastised, they knew how the ungodly were judged in wrath and tormented, thirsting in another manner than the just. For these thou didst admonish and try as a father, but the other, as a severe king, thou didst condemn and punish. Whether they were absent or present, they were vexed alike. For a double grief came upon them, and a groaning for the remembrance of things past. For when they heard by their own punishments the other to be benefited, they had some feeling of the Lord, for whom they rejected with scorn, when he was long before thrown out at the casting forth of the infants. Him in the end, when they saw what came to pass, they admired. But for the foolish devices of their wickedness, wherewith being deceived they worshipped serpents void of reason, and vile beasts, thou didst send a multitude of unreasonable beasts for them for vengeance, that they might know that wherewithal a man sinneth, by the same also shall he be punished. For thy almighty hand, that made the world of matter without form, wanted not means to send among them a multitude of bears or fierce lions, or unknown wild beasts full of rage, newly created, breathing out either a fiery vapor, or filthy scents of scattered smoke, or shooting horrible sparkles out of their eyes, whereof not only the harm might dispatch them at once, but also the terrible sight utterly destroy them. Sorry about that. Yea, arid without these they might have fallen down with one blast, being persecuted of vengeance, and scattered abroad through the breath of thy power. But thou hast ordered all things in measure, and number, and weight. For thou canst shew thy great strength at all times when thou wilt, and who may withstand the power of thine arm? For the whole world before thee is as a little grain of the balance, yea, as a drop of the morning dew that falleth down upon the earth. But thou hast mercy upon all, for thou canst do all things, and winkest at the sins of men, because they should amend. For thou lovest all the things that are, and abhorrest nothing which thou hast made, for never wouldest thou have made anything if thou hadst hated it. And how could anything have endured if it had not been by thy will, or been preserved, if not called by thee? But thou sparest all, for they are thine, O Lord, thou lover of souls. For thine incorruptible spirit is in all things. Therefore chastenest thou them little by little that offend, and warnest them by putting them in remembrance, wherein they have offended, that leaving their wickedness they may believe on thee, O Lord. For it was thy will to destroy by the hands of our fathers both those old inhabitants of thy holy land, whom thou hatedst for doing most odious works of witchcraft and wicked sacrifices, and also those merciless murderers of children, and devourers of men's flesh, and the feasts of blood. With their priests out of the midst of their idolatrous crew, and the parents that killed with their own hands souls destitute of help, that the land which thou esteemest above all other might receive a worthy colony of God's children. Nevertheless, even those thou sparedest as men, and didst send wasps, forerunners of thine host, to destroy them by little and little. Now that thou wast unable to bring the ungodly under the hand of the righteous in battle, not that thou wast unable to bring the ungodly under the hand of the righteous in battle, or to destroy them at once with cruel beasts, or with one rough word. But executing thy judgments upon them by little and little, thou gavest them place of repentance, not being ignorant that they were a naughty generation, and that their malice was bred in them, and that their cogitation would never be changed. For it was a cursed seed from the beginning. Neither didst thou fear for any of man give them pardon for those things wherein they sinned. For who shall say, What hast thou done? Or who shall withstand thy judgment? Or who shall accuse thee for the nations that perish, whom thou hast made? Or who shall come to stand against thee, to be revenged for the unrighteous men? For neither is there any God but thou, that careth for all, to whom thou mightest shew that thy judgment is not unright. Neither shall king or tyrant be able to set his face against thee, for any whom thou hast punished. For so much then as thou art righteous thyself, thou orderest all things righteously, thinking it not agreeable with thy power to condemn him that had not deserved to be punished. For thy power is the beginning of righteousness, and because thou art the Lord of all, it maketh thee to be gracious unto all. For when men will not believe that thou art full of power, thou shewest thy strength, and among them that know it, thou makest their boldness manifest. But thou, mastering thy power, judgest with equity, and orderest us with great favor, for thou mayest use power when thou wilt. But by such works hast thou taught thy people that the just man should be merciful, and hast made thy children to be of a good hope, that thou givest repentance for sins. For if thou didst punish the enemies of thy children, and the condemned to death, with such deliberation, giving them time and place, whereby they might be delivered from their malice, with how great circumspection didst thou judge thine own sons, unto whose fathers thou hast sworn, and made covenants of good promise. Therefore, whereas thou dost chasten us, thou scourgest our enemies 1,000 times more, to the intent that, when we judge, we should carefully think of thy goodness, and when we ourselves are judged, we should look for mercy. Wherefore, whereas men have lived dissolutely and unrighteously, thou hast tormented them with their own abominations. For they went astray very far in the ways of error, and held them for gods, which even among the beasts of their enemies were despised, being deceived as children of no understanding. Therefore unto them, as to children without any use of reason, thou didst send a judgment to mock them. But they that would not be reformed by that correction, wherein he dallied with them, shall feel a judgment worthy of God. For look, for what things they grudged when they were punished, that is, for them whom they thought to be gods, now being punished in them. When they saw it, they acknowledged him to be the true God, whom before they denied to know, and therefore came extreme damnation upon them. Surely vain are all men by nature, who are ignorant of God, and could not out of the good things that are seen know him that is. Neither by considering the works did they acknowledge the workmaster, but deemed either fire or wind or swift air, or the circle of stars, or the violent water, or the lights of heaven, to be gods which govern the world. With whose beauty, if they being delighted took them to be gods, let them know how much better the Lord of them is, for the first author of beauty hath created them. But if they were astonished at their power and virtue, let them understand by them how much mightier he is that made them. For by the greatness and beauty of the creatures proportionably the maker of them is seen. But yet for this they are less to be blamed, for they peradventure err, seeking God and desirous to find him. For being conversant in his works they search him diligently, and believe their sight, because the things are beautiful that are seen. Howbeit neither are they to be pardoned. For if they were able to know so much that they could aim at the world, how did they not sooner find out the Lord thereof? But miserable are they, and in dead things is their hope, who called them gods which are the works of men's hands, gold and silver, to shew art in, and resemblance of beasts, or a stone good for nothing, the work of an ancient hand. Sorry, the book keeps falling. We'll try it one more time. Nor a carpenter that felleth timber, after he hath sown down a tree, meet for the purpose, and taken off all the bark skilfully round about, and hath wrought it handsomely, and made a vessel thereof fit for the service of man's life. And after spending the refuse of his work to dress his meat, hath filled himself. And talking to the very refuse among those which serve to no use, being a crooked piece of wood, and full of knots, hath carved it diligently, when he had nothing else to do, and formed it by the skill of his understanding, and fashioned it to be the image of a man. Or made it like some vile beast, laying it over with vermilion, and with paint colouring it red, and covering every spot therein. And when he had made a covenant room for it, set it in a wall, and made it fast with iron. For he provided for it that it might not fall, knowing that it was unable to help itself, for it is an image, and hath need of help. Then maketh his prayer for his goods, for his wife and children, and is not ashamed to speak to that which hath no life. For health he calleth upon that which is weak, for life prayeth to that which is dead. For aid humbly beseecheth thee, which hath least means to help. And for a good journey he asketh of that which cannot set a foot forward. And for gaining and getting, and for good success of his hands, asketh ability to do of him that is most unable to do anything. Again, one preparing himself to sail, and about to pass through the raging waves, calleth upon a piece of wood more rotten than the vessel that carrieth him. For verily desire of gain devised that, and workman build it by his skill. But thy providence, O Father, governeth it, for thou hast made a way in the sea, and a safe path he waves. Shewing that thou canst save from all danger, yea, through a man went to sea without art. Nevertheless thou wouldest not that the works of thy wisdom should be idle, and therefore do men commit their lives to a small piece of wood, and passing the rough sea in a weak vessel are saved. For in the old time also, when the proud giants perished, the hope of the world governed by thy hand escaped in a weak vessel, and left to all ages a seed of generation. For blessed is the wood whereby righteousness cometh. But that which is made with the hands is cursed, as well it as he that made it. He because he made it, and it because being corruptible it was called a god. For the ungodly and his ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. For that which is made shall be punished together with him that made it. Therefore even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of God they are become an abomination, and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise. For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life. For neither were they from the beginning, neither shall they be forever. For by the vainglory of men they entered into the world, and therefore shall they shortly come to an end. For a father afflicteth with untimely mourning, when he hath made an image of his child soon taken away, now honored him as a god which was then a dead man, and delivered it to those who were under him for ceremonies and sacrifices. Thus in process of time an ungodly custom grew strong, was kept as a law, and graven images were worshipped by the commandments of kings, whom men could not honor in presence because they dwelt far off. They took the counterfeit of his visage from far, and made an express image of a king whom they honored, to the end that they by this their forwardness they might flatter him that was absent as if he were present. Also the singular diligence of the artificer did help to set forward the ignorant to be more superstition. For he, peradventure willing to please one in authority, forced all his skill to make the resemblance of the best fashion. And so the multitude, allured by the grace of the work, took him now for a god, which a little before was honored as but a man. And this was an occasion to deceive the world. For men, serving either calamity or tyranny, did ascribe unto stones and stocks the incommunicable name. Moreover, this was not enough for them, that they erred in the knowledge of God. But whereas they lived in the great war of ignorance, those so great plagues called they peace. For whilst they slew their children in sacrifices, or used secret ceremonies, or made revellings of strange rites, they kept neither lives nor marriages any longer undefiled, but either one slew another traitorously, or grieved him by adultery. So that there reigned in all men without exception blood, manslaughter, theft, dissimulation, corruption, unfaithfulness, tumults, and perjury. Disquieting of good men, forgetfulness of good turns, defiling of souls, changing of kind, disorder in marriages, adultery, and shameless uncleanliness. For the worshipping of idols not to be named is the beginning, the cause, and the end of all evil. For either they are mad when they be merry, or prophesy lies, or live unjustly, or else lightly forswear themselves. For insomuch as their trust is in idols, which have no life, though they swear falsely, yet they look not to be hurt. Howbeit for both causes shall they be justly punished, both because they thought not well of God, giving heed unto idols, and also unjustly sworn deceit, despising holiness. For it is not the power of them by whom they swear, but it is the just vengeance of sinners, that punisheth always the offense of the ungodly. But thou, O God, art gracious and true, long-suffering, and in mercy ordering all things. For if we sin, we are thine, knowing thy power, but we will not sin, knowing that we are counted thine. For to know thee is perfect righteousness, yea, to know thy power is the root of immortality. For neither did the mischievous invention of men deceive us, nor an image spotted with diverse colors, the painter's fruitless labor. The sight whereof enticeth fools to lust after it, and so they desire the form of a dead image that hath no breath. Both they that make them, they that desire them, and they that worship them, are lovers of evil things, and are worthy to have such things to trust upon. For the potter, tempering soft earth, fashioneth every vessel, with much labor for our service. Yea, of the same clay he maketh both the vessels that serve for clean uses, and likewise also such as serve to the contrary. But what is the use of either sort? The potter himself is the judge. And employing his labours lewdly, he maketh a vain god of the same clay, even he which a little before was made of earth himself, and within a little while after returneth to the same, out of that which he is taken, when his life which was lent him shall be demanded. Notwithstanding his care is, not that he shall have much labour, nor that his life is short, but striveth to excel goldsmiths and silversmiths, and endeavoureth to do like the workers in brass, and counteth it his glory to make counterfeit things. His heart is ashes, his hope is more vile than earth, and his life of less value than clay. Forasmuch as he knew not his Maker, and him that inspired into him an active soul, and breathed in a living spirit. But they counted our life a pastime, and our time here a market for gain. For say they, we must be getting every way, though it be by evil means. For this man that of earthly matter maketh brittle vessels and graven images, knoweth himself to offend above all others. And all the enemies of thy people, that hold them in subjection, are most foolish, and are more miserable than very babes. For they counted all the idols of the heathen to be gods, which neither have the use of eyes to see, nor noses to draw breath, nor ears to hear, nor fingers of hands to handle, and as for their feet, they are slow to go. For man made them, and he that borrowed his own spirit fashioned them, but no man can make a god like unto himself. For being mortal, he worketh a dead thing with wicked hands, for he himself is better than the things which he worshippeth, whereas he lived once, but they never. Yea, they worship those beasts also that are most hateful, for being compared together, some are worse than others. Neither are they beautiful, so much as to be desired in respect of beasts, but they went without the praise of God and his blessing. Therefore by the like were they punished worthily, and by the multitude of beasts tormented. Instead of which punishment, dealing graciously with thy own people, thou preparedst them for a meat of a strange taste, even quails to stir up their appetite. to the end that they, desiring food, might for the ugly sight of the beast sent among them, loathe even that, which they must needs desire. But these, suffering penury for a short space, might be made partakers of a strange taste. For it was requisite that upon them, exercising tyranny, should come penury, which they could not avoid, but to these it should only be shewed how their enemies were tormented. For when the horrible fierceness of beasts came upon these, and they perished with the stings of crooked serpents, thy wrath endured not forever. But they were troubled for a small season, that they might be admonished, having a sign of salvation, to put them in remembrance of the commandment of thy law. For he that turned himself toward it was not saved by the thing that he saw, but by thee, that art the Saviour of all. And in this thou madest thine enemies confess, that it is thou who deliverest from all evil. For them the bitings of grasshoppers and flies killed, neither was there found any remedy for their life, for they were worthy to be punished by such. But thy sons not the very teeth of venomous dragons overcame, for thy mercy was ever by them, and healed them. For they were pricked, that they should remember thy words, and were quickly saved, that not falling into deep forgetfulness, they might be continually mindful of thy goodness. For it was neither herb nor mollifying plaister that restored them to health, but thy word, O Lord, which healeth all things. For thou hast power of life and death. Thou leadest to the gates of hell, and bringest up again. A man indeed killeth through his malice, and the spirit, when it is gone forth, returneth not, neither the soul receiveth up, cometh again. But it is not possible to escape thine hand. For the ungodly that denied to know thee were scourged by the strength of thine arm. With strange rains, hails, and showers were they persecuted, that they could not avoid, and through fire were they consumed. For which is most to be wondered at, the fire had more force than the water, that quencheth all things, for the world fighteth for the righteous. For some time the flame was mitigated, that it might not burn up the beasts that were sent against the ungodly, but themselves might see and perceive that they were persecuted with the judgment of God. And at another time it burneth even in the midst of water above the power of fire, that it might destroy the fruits of an unjust land. Instead whereof thou feddest thine own people with angels' food, and didst send them from heaven bread prepared without their labor, able to content every man's delight, and agreeing to every taste. For thy substance declared thy sweetness unto thy children, and serving to the appetite of the eater, tempered itself to every man's liking. But snow and ice endured the fire, and melted not, that they might know that the fire burning in the hail, and sparkling in the rain, did destroy the fruits of the enemies. But this again did not forget his own strength, that the righteous might be nourished. For the creature that serveth thee, who art the Maker, increaseth his strength against the unrighteous for their punishment, and abateth his strength for the benefit of such as put their trust in thee. Therefore even then it was all altered into all fashions, and was obedient to thy grace, that nourisheth all things, according to the desire of them that need. That thy children, O Lord, whom thou lovest, might know that it is not the growing of fruits that nourisheth man, but that it is thy word which preserveth them that put their trust in thee. For that which was not destroyed of the fire, being warmed with a little sunbeam, soon melted away, that it might be known that we must prevent the sun to give thee thanks, and at the dayspring pray unto thee. For the hope of the unthankful shall melt away as the winter's hoar frost, and shall run away as unprofitable water. For great are thy judgments, and cannot be expressed, therefore unnurtured souls have erred. For when unrighteous men thought to oppress the holy nation, they being shut up in their houses, the prisoners of darkness, and fettered with the bonds of a long night, lay there exiled from the eternal providence. For while they supposed to lie hid in their secret sins, they were scattered under a dark veil of forgetfulness, being horribly astonished and troubled with strange apparitions. For neither might the corner that held them keep them from fear, but noises as of waters falling down sounded about them, and sad visions appeared unto them with heavy countenances. No power of the fire might give them light, neither could the bright flames of the stars endure to lighten that horrible night. Only there appeared unto them a fire kindled of itself, very dreadful, for being much terrified they thought the things which they saw to be worse than the sight they saw not. As for the illusions of art and magic, they were put down, and their vaunting in wisdom was reproved with disgrace. For they that promised to drive away terrors and troubles from the sick soul were sick themselves of fear, worthy to be laughed at. For though no terrible thing did fear them, yet being scared with beasts that passed by, and the hissing of serpents, they died for fear, denying that they saw the air, which could of no side be avoided. For wickedness condemned by her own witness is very timorous, and being pressed with conscience, always forecasteth grievous things. For fear is nothing else but a betraying of the succours which reason offereth, and the expectation from within, being less, counteth the ignorance more than the cause which bringeth the torment. But they sleeping the same sleep that night, which was indeed intolerable, and which came upon them out of the bottoms of inevitable hell, were partly vexed with monstrous apparitions, and partly fainted, their heart failing them, for a sudden fear, and not looked for, came upon them. So that whensoever there fell down was straitly kept, shut up in a prison without iron bars. For whether he were husbandman or shepherd, or a laborer in the field, he was overtaken, and endured that necessity which could not be avoided, for they were all bound with one chain of darkness. Whether it were a whistling wind, or a melodious noise of birds among the spreading branches, or a pleasing fall of water running violently, or a terrible sound of stones cast down, or a running that could not be seen of skipping beasts, or a roaring voice of most savage wild beasts, or a rebounding echo from the hollow mountains, these things made them swoon to fear. For the whole world shined with clear light, and none were hindered in their labor. Over them only was spread in heavy night, and an image of darkness which should afterwards receive them, but yet were they unto themselves more grievous than the darkness. Nevertheless thy saints had a very great light, whose voice they hearing and not seeing their shape, because they also had not suffered the same things, they counted them happy. But for what they did not hurt them now, of whom they had been wronged before, they thanked them, and besought them pardon, for that they had been enemies. Instead whereof thou gavest them a burning pillar of fire, both to be a guide of the unknown journey, and an harmless sun to entertain them honorably. For they were worthy to be deprived of light, and imprisoned in darkness, who had kept thy sun shut up, but whom the uncorrupt light of the law was to be given unto the world. And when they had determined to slay the babes of the saints, one child being cast forth and saved to reprove them, thou tookest away the multitude of their children, and destroyed them altogether in a mighty water. Out of that night were our fathers certified afore, that assuredly knowing unto what oaths they had been given credence, they might afterwards be of good cheer. So of thy people was accepted both the salvation of the righteous, and destruction of the enemies. For wherewith thou didst punish our adversaries, by the same thou didst glorify us, whom thou hast called. For the righteous children of good men did sacrifice secretly, with one consent made a holy law, that the saints should be alike partakers of the same good and evil, the fathers now singing out the songs of praise. But on the other side there sounded an ill-according cry of the enemies, and a lamentable noise was carried abroad for children that were bewailed. The master and the servant were punished after one manner, and like as the king, so suffered the common person. So they altogether had innumerable dead with one kind of death, neither were the living sufficient to bury them, for in one moment the noblest offspring of them was destroyed. For whereas they would not believe anything by reason of the enchantments, upon the destruction of the firstborn, they acknowledged this people to be the sons of God. For while all things were in quiet silence, and that night was in the midst of her swift course, thine almighty word leaped down from heaven out of thy royal throne, as a fierce man of war into the midst of the land of destruction, and brought thine unfeigned commandment as a sharp sword, and standing up filled all things with death, and it touched the heaven, but it stood upon the earth. Then suddenly visions of horrible dreams troubled them sore, and terrors came upon them unlooked for. And one thrown here and another there, half dead, shewed the cause of bust death. But the dreams that troubled them did foreshew this, lest they should perish, and not know why they were afflicted. Yea, the tasting of death touched the righteous also, but there was a destruction of the multitude in the wilderness, but the wrath endured not long. For then the blameless men made haste, and stood forth to defend them, and bringing the shield of his proper ministry, even prayer and the propitiation of incense, set himself against the wrath, and so brought the calamity to an end, declaring that he was thy servant. So he overcame the destroyer, not with strength of body, nor force of arms, but with a word subdued he him that punishment. Alleging the oaths and covenants made with the fathers. For when the dead were now fallen down by heaps one upon another, standing between, he stayed the wrath, and parted the way to the living. For in the long garment was the whole world, and in the 4 rows of stones was the glory of the fathers graven, and thy majesty upon the diadem of his head. Unto these the destroyer gave place, and was afraid of them, for it was enough that they had only tasted of the wrath. As for the ungodly, wrath came upon them without mercy unto the end, for he knew before what they would do. How that having given them leave to depart, and sent them hastily away, they would repent and pursue them. For whilst they were yet mourning and making lamentation at the graves of the dead, they added another foolish device, and pursued them as fugitives, whom they had entreated to be gone. For the destiny whereof they were worthy drew them unto this end, and made them forget the things that had already happened, that they might fulfill the punishment which was wanting to their torments. And that thy people might pass a wonderful way, but they might find a strange death. For the whole creature in his proper kind was fashioned again anew, serving the peculiar commandments that were given unto them, that thy children might be kept without hurt. As namely, a cloud shadowing the camp, and where water stood before, dry land appeared, and out of the Red Sea a way without impediment, and out of the violent stream a green field. Where through all the people went that were defended with thy hand, seeing thy marvelous strange wonders. For they went at large like horses, and leaped like lambs, praising thee, O Lord, who hast delivered them. For they were yet mindful of the things that were done while they sojourned in the strange land, how the ground brought forth flies instead of cattle, and how the river cast up a multitude of frogs instead of fishes. But afterwards they saw a new generation of fowls, when being led with their appetite, they asked delicate meats. For quails came up unto them from the sea for their contentment. And punishments came upon the sinners not without former signs by the force of thunders. For they suffered justly according to their own wickedness, insomuch as they used a more hard and hateful behavior toward strangers. For the Sodomites did not receive those whom they knew not when they came, but these brought friends into bondage that had well deserved of them. And not only so, but peradventure some respect shall be had of those, because they use strangers not friendly. But these very grievously afflicted them, whom they had received with feastings, and were already made partakers of the same laws with them. Therefore even with blindness were these stricken, and those were at the doors of the righteous man, when being compassed about with horrible great darkness, every one sought the passage of his own doors. For the elements were changed in themselves by a kind of harmony, like as in a psaltery does change the name of the tune, and yet are always sounds which may be perceived by the sight of the things that have been done. For earthly things were turned into watery, and the things that before swam in the water now went upon the ground. The fire had power in the water, forgetting his own virtue, and the water forgot his own quenching nature. On the other side the flames wasted not the flesh of the corruptible living things, though they walked therein, neither melted the icy kind of heavenly meat that was of nature apt to melt. For in all things, O Lord, thou didst magnify thy people and glorify them. Neither did thou lightly regard them, but did assist them in every time and place. Well, that is the end. I'm sorry for the little bit of stuttering and maybe even a little mispronunciations of some of the... This is obviously in the Old English King James translation, so I may have stumbled over some of those words. I'm sorry for that. But if you listen, you can make any sense of that. Basically, the whole thing was a poem about the Exodus. I mean, you heard talk in there of the people being punished, and it said that God was leading, destroying the people of the land he deemed the highest, the land of Canaan, so that he could take a colony of his own people in there. And they spoke of idols, of course, when Moses went on the mountain. Aaron had made the golden calf for the people, and it talked about the serpents in the wilderness. When the Israelites got struck by serpents because they had disobeyed God, it talked about that. The Red Sea, there at the end, it was talking about the Pharaoh when it was saying, it said that he had given up because the children died, and then he let them go, and it said he made a mistake, decided to pursue them again. That, of course, was talking about the Pharaoh, and it spoke about the frogs and the rivers of blood and the hail and whatnot, the plagues of Egypt. So that was it, the Wisdom of Solomon from the Apocrypha. Basically a very large poem about the exodus from Egypt underneath Moses. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't mess it up too bad. The first video was very popular. I hope all those people come to watch the second one, and next time I'd like to do a different book. There's a book in here called The Wisdom of the Son of Sirach, or The Wisdom of Jesus. Not Jesus Christ, that is, but another Jesus. And it's very much like the Proverbs. There's a lot of two-line statements of wisdom. I'd probably like to do that one next. Because, you know, it just reads so well. It's really fun to read and really fun to listen to. But anyway, I'll stop rambling. Thank you. And if you listen to these two videos, you'll have heard the Wisdom of Solomon from the Apocrypha. And stay tuned for more books from the Apocrypha. Thank you.